Margaret had never been the kind of woman who needed to be thanked. She had written the checks quietly, the way she did most things, without announcement, without the expectation of a plaque on the wall or a seat at the head of the table. When Daniel needed tuition for his second year of graduate school, the money appeared in his account on a Tuesday. When the house in Fairfield came up and the down payment was $60,000 more than Daniel and Priya had saved, Margaret transferred the difference without being asked twice. When his consulting firm was 3 months from collapse in its second year, she signed the loan documents in a coffee shop, slid them across the table, and ordered a second cup while he cried. She had never once said, "You owe me." That was not her language. The shift with Priya had not been sudden. That was the part Margaret turned over most often in the months that followed. How gradual it had been. How she had explained each small thing away until the small things had become the entire landscape. The engagement party was the first moment she couldn't explain. She'd arrived in the dress she'd bought, specifically for the occasion, a deep burgundy she'd been told suited her, and found her place card at the far end of a supplemental table near the catering station. She sat beside a woman named Ellen, who was the +1 of Priya's cousin, and who spent the evening telling Margaret about a timeshare she was trying to sell in Arizona. Daniel had crossed the room once to squeeze her shoulder and say, "You look great, Mom." Then he was gone. She drove home that night thinking, perhaps it was a seating error. Perhaps the planner had misread the chart. She said this to herself with enough firmness that she almost believed it. The night before the wedding, the house in Fairfield, her son's house, bought with her money, a detail she had never once mentioned aloud, was full of Priya's family. Her parents, her 2 sisters, 3 aunts, a collection of cousins who moved through rooms like they had always lived there. Margaret had arrived at 6, as Daniel asked. By 6:30, she was standing in the kitchen doorway, not entirely sure where to position herself. Priya's aunt, a compact woman named Renu, who organized the kitchen with military efficiency, turned from the counter and held out an apron without looking up. "You can start on the salads," she said. It wasn't cruel in tone. That was the part that lodged itself somewhere behind Margaret's sternum and stayed. It was simply the voice of someone who had assessed the room and assigned its least necessary person to the least consequential task. Margaret took the apron. She looked across the kitchen island toward the living room, where Daniel stood with Priya's father, laughing at something. He had seen the exchange. She was certain of it. He did not move. She tied the apron strings behind her back and began tearing lettuce into a bowl, and the kitchen moved around her like she was a piece of furniture that had always been there. 8 months earlier, Margaret had offered the honeymoon as a gift. It had come from a place of genuine warmth. She remembered feeling it, that particular tenderness of wanting to give something meaningful. A private overwater villa in the Maldives, 14 nights, $93,000, reserved under her name, requiring her final confirmation before the booking closed. She had meant to send that confirmation in the weeks before the wedding. She had not yet sent it. The morning after the ceremony, Margaret made coffee in her own kitchen, in her own house, and sat at her own table for a long time. She did not feel rage. She had expected to, and its absence surprised her. What she felt was something more like clarity, the uncomfortable, unwelcome kind that arrives when a thing you hoped was untrue becomes simply true. She had mattered in the way that money matters. When the money was needed, she was present. When the money was given, she became peripheral. It was not a complicated equation. She had simply refused to do the arithmetic until now. She opened her laptop. She found the email thread with the resort's reservations manager, a man named Thomas who had been efficient and pleasant throughout the booking process. She composed a short message. She thanked him for his assistance. She explained that personal circumstances had changed and she would need to cancel the reservation. She asked that the refund be returned to her account per the cancellation policy. She read it once. She sent it. Daniel called 4 days later when the resort's cancellation notice reached him. His voice carried the particular quality of someone trying to sound measured while being neither. Margaret answered on the 3rd ring. She let him finish. Then she said, "I realized I couldn't honor a gift I made under different circumstances. I'm sorry for the timing." There was a long pause. "What does that mean?" he said. "I think you know," she said. "I hope the trip is lovely." "I mean that." She did mean it. Partially. She hung up and sat with her coffee, which had gone cold again. Outside, the light was flat and gray, the kind of morning that doesn't ask anything of you. She did not feel like a woman who had won something. She felt like a woman who had finally stopped pretending that losing was fine. Those are not the same thing. But that morning, in the quiet of her kitchen, the distance between them felt, for the first time, like something she could live inside honestly. She did not retie the apron. She put it in the donation bag by the door. That was all.